Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 139 of the show, and before we get started, I'm going to do a house cleaning quick because, well, you guys know we always like to do it around here, so, you know, it always makes sense that we do it. So, yeah, even though today's episode is going to be a little bit interesting to say the least, granted, it's nothing related to the Xbox because, well, like I told you guys before, we still have a lot of stuff to work on. But I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening. It really does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly keep coming back and you keep downloading these episodes. You keep sharing these episodes. You constantly keep letting me know how you feel about them, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for helping us get over 1,975 total downloads, only 25 away before we hit 2,000. So fingers crossed we can get 2,000 before the end of the year because, you know, that's kind of been what I wanted to do for this year. The goal was to get over 2,000 before the end of the year. And if, you know, hopefully we can get that before the two-year anniversary of the show, which is coming up. So, you know, that's coming. But I do also want to say thank you to the Patreon backers for constantly supporting me because, you know, you guys are great. You guys support me, so greatly appreciate you guys. And I also want to say thank you guys for just everything because you guys are continuing to be great. You guys are always great. You guys, I've always said this before, that to me, doing the show is just a good way to relax. It's a good way to, you know, take a step back from what's going on and just enjoy myself, really, and just talk about technology. And obviously, given the big shifts that I've talked about on my social media handles, yeah, it's definitely a big shift happening. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I do want to get in today's episode because we do have to talk about the hot topic today, which is the Apple Silicon Macs, or as they're officially known now, the M1 chip Macs. And I have a lot of thoughts to say about this, especially after seeing a lot of reviews and seeing what a lot of people have to say about these new products, or specifically the new Macs running Apple's own silicon. And I'm a bit concerned while watching the reviews because I do believe there's a difference between how would I put this? I would say there's definitely a difference between being overly positive about something and then at least being generally positive about it, because I've yet to heard a single negative thing about these new Macs. I've yet to heard a single bad thing. And that's a bit concerning, especially when this is a review, when the whole point is, yes, if something is doing something right, we say, yes, this is doing great. It's doing well in these areas. And, you know, we give credit where credit's due. However, I'm a bit concerned when I don't hear any complaints about some issues that a lot of people, or I wouldn't say issues, but more of concerns people have about the new Macs. And I think that's a bit concerning, especially that these reviews are coming off as a little bit too positive, that it almost seems like there's nothing wrong with these machines, that everything is fine and dandy. And I just don't think that's right. Maybe some people say, Josh, you're going to play devil advocate now. And I'm like, well, the whole point is to be as objective and as honest as we can, especially as reviewers and people that do commentary in technology and business and, you know, the video game industry, that we should be objective, and, or at least as objective as humanly possible, but also acknowledge, hey, make it clear that we have a bias in these areas, like make it clear to our audience. And I just feel like there's a clear bias that they're making this whole transition seem like it's the greatest thing ever. And I feel like, yes, I can see the pros and cons that happen with this transition, because yes, there's definitely some pros, and we'll talk about them. Like, let's talk about them. One of the main pros of transferring of, specifically, I would say, Apple going from Intel, the 8th or the x86 platform to the ARM architecture in their Apple Silicon chips or the M1 chips is that yes, there's definitely more power efficient chips being made on Apple's camp right now, that the chips, or specifically the M1 chip, is far more power efficient and consumes far less power than the Intel offerings. But at the same time, as well as being more power efficient, you get better battery life. The fact that these things are advertising, specifically the new MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro running the M1 chips, the fact that these things are offering like 17 to 20 hours of battery life is incredible, because in a laptop, that's not really natural. That's not necessarily a normal thing that you see every day, because yes, manufacturers can advertise we get 14 this and this and this, and they get only about like 7 or 8 or 10. The fact that these MacBooks are doing such an incredible job on battery life, I applaud Apple for it, and I think that deserves praise, because that's crazy in the laptop space. And in terms of power efficiency, the fact that these things are barely drawing any power, which especially in those small form factors, is very impressive. The fact that they're not generating heat as quickly as the Intel offerings, because that's just the cold hard reality, is that was one of the downsides that Apple had using the Intel chipset, was the thermal performance. A lot of people did not appreciate the thermal performance that were given in the MacBook Air or the 13-inch MacBook Pro or even the 16-inch MacBook Pro, where you had these kind of thermal performance issues. And it was very concerning in that sense, because it's like, well, crap, like, what do we do? And it's like that ultimately, I would say that's a reason why Apple left Intel, because Intel was very sluggish in providing something that was more efficient, more thermal, didn't have so many issues in terms of thermal performance, because Apple wanted to continue to go with a more slim chassis design that was very, light, portable. However, in terms of thermal performance with current technology, it wasn't possible to maintain healthy thermal performance without thermal throttling and, hot to touch feels using the laptops. So the fact that Apple's been able to pull it off using their M1 chips is very impressive, especially on the first try, because we also have to keep in mind, this is a first generation product. And that's also a pro and a con. The fact that it's doing well for a first performance, for a first generation product, that the performance is great and everything, but that's also a con because this is still a first gen product. Most of these people haven't had these things for over a month, over a year. People have only been testing these things for a week. I guarantee you, give it a couple months, you're gonna find issues, and pretty big issues. And this is my concern that I specifically have with doing reviews like this, because I do not believe a week of testing something is worth, I would say, substantial enough evidence to support doing a review. I do not believe that that's enough testing. I do not believe that's healthy. I do not believe it's accurate. I believe that short-term thinking that doesn't help anybody, because you have a lot of people that are interested in these products. But I would not go out of my way and say that this is a full in-depth review, because you cannot do a full in-depth review in a week. You can't, with no piece of technology. There's no exceptions to the rule. It needs a couple months, because you have to see how this thing performs in everyday life, actual situations, and not just running benchmark after benchmark for a whole week and saying, this is what I found for a week and it seems good to me, so we'll just go with it. And I have told people multiple times that I just don't feel like that's a healthy or accurate way of going about doing things. I just don't agree with it. And I think that's a misleading way to inform people, because I don't consider it accurate information. I personally believe if you're going to run tests of something, a week of testing is not good enough. Even in the professional sense, in the professional world, you're not testing things for a week. You're testing things for a month, years, to make sure that what you're saying is accurate. And yes, I get it. Apple's been testing these things for a lot of period of time, and they've been making some super big claims, especially when you watch the presentation. They were very big claims. But I still tell people, do not go out and buy these things day one. Yes, I do agree that there's some people that will go out and buy it regardless, because you have to have test subjects. And I will say that you guys are test subjects. I'm like guilty as charged. I bought the new Xbox day one. I'm guilty as charged. So if anything pops up, I'm a test subject. That's just a cold hard reality. But I'm not going to go out of my way and say that everything is all fine and dandy because I've only had it for such a limited period of time. That's why I told people when I did my early impressions of the Xbox Series X, which you can go find that up there, I made it very clear that I'm going to give it a month before I do an actual full in-depth review with gameplay and things like that, because I do not feel like that is appropriate for a couple days with the Xbox. I told people I do not believe that a couple days is enough to justify this experience, to justify a review. It doesn't. And I feel like a lot of reviewers, yes, I get it. YouTube's algorithm and how this thing works is, yes, you got to get the headlines, you got to get the clicks, you got to do what you got to do. But I just don't believe, especially with this big of a transition from Apple going from Intel, from x86 to ARM platform with their own processors, it's such a big switch. And to say that it was as smooth, I would say as painless as possible, is a horrible, horrible assumption. I believe that you are blatantly misinforming people if you're saying that, because that is not true. This isn't painless. There's still things that you have not tested that you cannot tell me that they work perfectly fine. Yes, I get it. Some people said, well, Photoshop and the Adobe Suite works perfectly fine and they're not optimized because they're running on Rosetta 2. But still, the fact that there's no evidence of boot camp, we still haven't even got to mention the right to repair situation, which we're not ignoring that, which it's kind of convenient that a lot of people have been ignoring that. Very ironically that a lot of people are ignoring that part. And at the same time, we have to talk about longevity with other fields and other people's creative workflows and things like that, specifically like audio engineers. How do you think they're going to feel about this transition? Like, this is not a smooth and painless transition. And Apple themselves even said it. This is not going to be smooth and painless. They're going to try to make it as smooth as possible. But even they weren't crazy enough to say that there was no pain involved. And I feel like it's bad when you have a lot of people that have very large influences trying to make this seem as a painless transition and hyping this up as the next big thing, which, yes, I agree. More competition in the space is good. However, we need to be objective when we look at these things and not just say that these things are amazing, that PCs are dead and things like that, because you sound stupid. You legit sound stupid to say that PCs are dead because of this launch. Like, I am going to call you a fool because there's a lot of things that you cannot do on a Mac. And I will say this over and over again. Engineers hate the Mac because a lot of proprietary software for engineering does not run on macOS that well. It doesn't. And a lot of people get mad about that. And I'm like, there's a good reason, because people need very specific hardware. They need very specific software. They only run on Windows. That's why a lot of companies still tell people, do not buy a Mac. We will not give you a Mac to do your job. People will have a Mac in their home, and that's fine and dandy. But when you're in the field or at your job, you're going to be running Windows. The engineering department at many colleges say the same thing. Do not bring a Mac unless you run boot camp. And now in this situation, you can't even run boot camp on these things. So it's like, you're kind of SOL now. If you buy one of the new M1 Macs and you try to run your software and you're like, well, I can't run it. And your department's like, we told you not to buy this, but you bought it. So you're SOL. That's your fault. And now who do you have to blame? And I feel like we have to be more cautious, especially as tech reviewers and as tech commentators and people that are well informed on the subject at hand, need to be more mindful of the things that they say, because you're informing a large group of people. You're informing a lot of people that don't really pay attention to these kind of things. They don't ask these kind of questions. And yes, some people say, well, it's their job as a buyer to be informed. Yes, that is true. But I will also say it's your job as somebody who's informed to make the information clear and concise and try to be as objective as possible and give that information to let someone decide for themselves rather than making the decision for them, because that's what you're supposed to do. And I get it. There's people that are biased, and there's people that make it abundantly clear that they're biased. And I think that's healthy, because that's actually good. That's good that you're admitting, yes, I have a personal bias with this. So when I talk about this, I'm making it very clear I have a strong bias towards it or a strong bias against it. But you're making it clear and upfront beforehand. You're not just letting people figure it out as they go along. And I feel like it's a bit concerning, especially when you look at this whole Mac launch. Yes, I agree. I think the new machines are great. I think they perform great. And especially as first generation products, I think they're great. I think what we're getting out of them is incredible. And I think Apple did a phenomenal job and they deserve praise. However, there are some still major, and I would say serious, long-term consequences to this transition. Primarily optimization, primarily things like boot camp, the right to repair. So let's actually talk about the right to repair while we're at it, because let's be honest here. As much as Apple likes to promote that they are this green, eco-friendly company, in terms of right to repair, with, you know, a lack of a better word, they're kind of a POS. And Apple does not appreciate it when you try to repair your own products. They don't. I think that's a very bad move, and I've been very vocal and adamant about that I am for the right to repair. I believe if you own a device, you should be allowed to repair it. You should be allowed to do whatever you want to because it is your device. You paid for it out of your money. You own the device. It no longer belongs to the company. If you mess something up, yes, when you're repairing it, if you mess something up, that's on you. But I think that's fair that you are given the opportunity to do it yourself rather than having to go through the manufacturer to get it fixed. Like, I believe it's fair that the manufacturer should give you the pieces that you need to repair it on your own if you so choose to. If you mess up, that's on your fault. Like, that's on you. And I think that's something a lot of people need to realize is now that Apple owns the entire chain, software, hardware, and development, they run the whole shebang, the whole chain. They have a whole vertical chain. And this is a problem because now even things like the Mac Mini, you can't upgrade the RAM. All the RAM, the graphics card, everything is all integrated into the board with the processor. And same thing with the SSDs. And I think that's a very concerning thing, especially in terms of the right to repair, because it's like, well, what if it breaks and you don't have warranty? How are you gonna fix it? The manufacturer won't fix it for you because it's out of warranty. This is what people like Louis Rossmann have been worried about. And I've warned people, yes, I do believe there'll be benefits with Apple switching to their own silicon. However, there will be drawbacks. And one of them is the right to repair, that you will not be able to repair your own product. And that's a very concerning thing. And I get it. Some people say, Josh, most people don't even repair their own things, but that's true. But I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. That's what I'm getting at, is that I would rather have the ability to do it and not need to do it than need to do it and not have the ability to do it. I think that's something that we all need to be mindful of, because yes, you will not be able to repair your own MacBooks or anything like that. You won't be able to repair your MacBooks. You won't be able to repair your MacBook Pros. You can't repair your Mac Minis now. And imagine what happens when the Mac Pro comes out, when they make an M1 or whatever generation M series processor for the Mac Pro. What's going to happen? The Mac Pro has always been considered the professional device that you have complete control of customization, obviously besides CPU, but you can customize the RAM, the graphics card, the SSDs, everything is at your disposal to upgrade. What's going to happen with that? You know, like, you have to imagine how scary that is for a lot of professionals. And I've talked to professionals, specifically audio engineers, that have mentioned that they didn't like where Apple was going, that you were limiting your ability to repair your own device, to upgrade and things like that, and needing to upgrade things. Like, heck, Catalina was a nightmare for a lot of people in terms of audio engineering and video editing, because Catalina was a pain in the ass. It was a pain in the ass, and a lot of people didn't want to touch it because of the issues that it had. And now we have Big Sur, and now we have a whole transition to a new architecture. So it's like, how is things like Pro Tools going to run? How is things like the universal audio interfaces? How are they going to run on those things? Because those are very popular interfaces for Mac, because they primarily are designed for Mac. A lot of software is designed for the Mac. So it's like, yes, in time it will get there, but it's like, how long is it going to take? And to me, it's just a bit concerning, because yes, I do agree that Apple did a great job, and I do acknowledge the power of these processors because they're competing very well. But I still will also say that when you talk about multi-core and you do benchmarks and you do single core performance, multi-core performance, that yes, people are showing that these things are outperforming a 5900X or the 5950X, and things like that. However, that doesn't mean these things are going to be able to handle the same task as those processors, because those are 12 core 24-thread processors and 16 core 32-thread processors respectively, compared to a 4x4, which really is what the thing is. It's a 4x4. It has 4 efficiency cores, 4 performance cores, and the GPU. Or on terms of the MacBook Air, a 7-core GPU, and on the GPU on the MacBook Pro is a 8-core. This is a bit concerning because, yes, in terms of the benchmarks, the numbers, it performs better. How is it going to perform an actual day-to-day task? Like, how is it going to run these things in comparison to these parts? And I think over time we will see this, but you also have to keep in mind we're comparing Windows to macOS, and I don't believe that's a fair comparison to do that, because there's going to be issues. There's still going to be benefits. Like, I will tell people to the highest king or whoever I need to tell, I'll go to the highest mountain in the world and yell it out. You should not be gaming on a Mac. Like, I know Apple's going to try their best. I will never game on a Mac. No one should ever game on a Mac. That is a stupid idea. It is a no-go. Gaming is meant for Windows. It is meant for consoles. It's not really designed for Mac OS, because, yes, I get it. Some people play Minecraft on their MacBooks and stuff like that, but still. Actual professional gaming or even casual gaming should never be done on a Mac. Would it be cool if the option was there? Yes. I do not believe that's what a Mac is designed for. A Mac is a work tool. Macs have always been designed as work tools, professional tools used by professionals for professional tasks. That's always what they've been for. And that's why, you know, the iPad Air and even the iPad Pro are starting to become more of that professional tool now. Same thing with the Mac, same thing with MacBook Air. Like, they're primarily designed for students for doing school work. They're not meant for gaming. And I know some people say, well, Apple should get into the gaming space. Not really. Like, you do not have the power to compete. And yes, I know some people say it will be different over time. Josh, you're just being a hater. No, it's being honest, because you also have to realize these developers do not develop these games for macOS. They don't. They develop them specifically for Windows. It literally says, do you run Windows? That's how you will run this. Like, it doesn't mention macOS or anything like that. And I think that's just something people need to be mindful of, especially as you guys, as listeners or watchers, whichever one you're doing. If you're watching on YouTube, then you get to see my lovable face. Or if you're listening on everything else, then you get to listen to my voice. But whoever is watching and listening, please be mindful and take everything that you see from reviewers with a grain of salt. Please, for the love of all that is holy, take it with a grain of salt. Take all the information and do your own testing, do your own results, like, do your own findings. What do you find out? Like, what results do you get? Is this a healthy buy for you? Is this not a healthy buy? I have told people for many years, yes, I will never buy a Mac for my own personal use, like my own personal daily, everyday use. I will never own a Mac. That's me, because everything that I do relies on Windows. I have my iPad Pro to do everything else, or just basic things like typing up documents, typing up emails, you know, doing my calendar checks and things like that, and playing some games on there and FaceTiming people and iMessaging people. But most of my work will always be done on the big boy, because the big boy is built to do everything I need it to do. And I tell people all the time, I get it. For, especially in my case, running a podcast and doing video editing and stuff like that. People tell me, Josh, I think a Mac would be a good fit for you, bro. And I'm like, I know. I'm not saying it wouldn't be, because that's what they're designed to do. Macs are incredible when it comes to video editing and audio. Like, Logic is amazing. Like, obviously Pro Tools runs better on Mac OS, because they actually partner. I can get access to better interfaces because it's running on Thunderbolt. And a lot of those companies really, really love Mac. They do. Like Universal Audio. Universal Audio loves MacBooks. Everything they do is made for the Mac and then gets ported to Windows. That's just objective fact. That's what happens. But there's also some other concerns. You know, the USB ports, the Thunderbolt ports on these new Macs. Is it limited because of the silicone? Is it limited because of the bandwidth? These things, especially when you look at the new 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 processor, you can only get 2 Thunderbolt ports. The highest end version last year, or the 2020 13-inch MacBook Pro refresh with the Intel processor, has 4 Thunderbolt ports. That's the high end model. That's how you could distinguish which is the lower end and which is the higher end. The higher end has 4, the lower end has 2. The fact that even the highest end M1 processor MacBook Pro doesn't have all the Thunderbolt ports is a bit concerning. But to me, I'm still impressed. I'm still amazed with what Apple has been able to pull off. However, I do need to say and make this very clear. Please take everything with a grain of salt. All these are early tests. None of this is like official 100% go by. And I really hope that a lot of reviewers that are reviewing these products that either get them from Apple or buy them themselves make it abundantly clear this should not be taken as gospel. What they say should not be gospel, because it's not. They have not tested these things long enough, especially for a transition this big. This is not enough to warrant a review. I would have said these are my first impressions. We are working on an in-depth review. Same thing with like people like Jared Poland when it comes to cameras. I watch Jared a lot when it comes to camera reviews and tips for cameras. And Jared takes his sweet time. He takes months with a camera. He takes weeks to a month to even months to review a camera, and then releases like a long 1 hour plus video, in depth, fully in depth. Nothing gets untouched. Everything is touched on. But he makes it very clear what is a first impression and what is a review. A review is not a week. It is not a couple days with an item. It's a couple of weeks. I would say a month at minimum. And then go from there. Continue, keep it as an ongoing conversation. Don't just end it at, okay, here's my review, we're done. No, it's an ongoing conversation. I did the same thing when I did my first impressions with the Xbox. I told you, this is not a, this is when the review happens, then we're done. No, it's an ongoing conversation that constantly evolves over time because technology changes over time. Software changes. Better optimizations happen. Better, I would say, implementations of new hardware happen. And this is what requires a lot of in-depth and long-term reviewing, because I get it. That's not the most popular thing to do on YouTube. I get it. It's not, because a lot of people prefer doing their own thing. They prefer going after the clicks, trying to get as many people to watch their videos as they can and go from there and call it a day. That I'm not trying to discredit their research and things like that. I'm not doing that in regards to anybody. I respect a lot of people in their work, but I will criticize when something doesn't seem right, when it just seems things are way too positive and it's too good to be true. And I know some people will say, Josh, it's all true, brother. You got to jump on the Kool-Aid, bro. And I'm just like, dude, it sounds way too good to be true. It sounds way too positive that it's borderlining the point where I think it's bullshit. Like, it's getting to that point where I just think, dude, this feels like bullshit. Like, because it's just, there's no way that it's so positive. Like, it just doesn't register, because it's like, I just feel like there's also a lot of things a lot of people are skipping over that they don't want to talk about and conveniently are ignoring. And it's concerning. And I would say, as you know, as listeners and viewers of this channel, and even of the show, that if you've been a long time follower of me, or even any of the people I've interviewed like Juan and things like that, like, yes, I would take everything with a grain of salt. I would be mindful. I would do your own research. I would look into yourself, and do not take anybody's opinion as gospel. Not even my own. My opinion is not gospel. I'm making this very clear. This is how I am viewing the situation, how I am addressing the situation, how I'm assessing everything. I do not have one of these things in my own personal possession. Could I change my mind? Yeah, and try it out and see, and I'll let you guys know what I think after a couple months. But I am going to take my own advice, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and see what happens, how these things perform in a long-term use. How do professionals react to these things? How do professional softwares actually work with these things? I'm not going to rely on what somebody tells me, because I would need to try it for myself, because somebody could say this sucks. Some person could say this is great. At the end of the day, it's how do I feel about it? Because it's coming out of your pocket. It's not coming out of their pocket. You're the one paying for it. So your opinion and how you view it matters. And to me, I think that's the best place to leave it, because all we can do now is just continue to watch the reviews as they come out, continue to assess them case by case, and make this an open-ended conversation that doesn't end here. Because I applaud Apple. I applaud the transition. I applaud on how they were able to do this in this manner and get this much performance out of their own chip on the first try, and at least deliver some interesting parts of their claims. But there's still claims that still need to be assessed, that still need to be tested. And that requires weeks, months, maybe years. It requires a lot of time. We cannot treat this as one and done, game over. We can't. That's not fair. That's not healthy. That does not promote good buying decisions. In my personal opinion, it doesn't. I've been adamant about that. I will stay firm about that. This does not promote healthy buying decisions. And in my opinion, I would say wait. I would wholeheartedly recommend you wait. Do not jump on the bandwagon. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Take a step back, breathe, assess everything, go from there. But that's all I have to say for you guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. How do you guys feel about the Apple Silicon Max? Like, how do you guys actually feel about watching some of the reviews that you've seen so far? If you've watched any, and just let me know. You guys agree with me, disagree with me? You can let me know by clicking the like or dislike button. You guys do whatever you want, you know? Like, I can't tell you guys what to do, but in my opinion, I do thank you guys for coming back and listening. Again, you guys are lovely. You guys are great. You know, thank you guys for everyone that's watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, really like to listen to your podcast, you know, greatly appreciate you guys. I love you guys to death. Please have yourselves a wonderful week. Please don't do anything dumb. Please continue to take care of everyone around you as well, because things are still weird out there. And do what you got to do. You know, that's really all I can say is do what is the right thing to do. I can't tell you what the right thing to do is, but do what's right. Do the right thing, in my opinion, and be smart. And try to be as objective as you possibly can be in every situation you're in. That doesn't just mean technology or like how you buy things, how you spend your money. I would say try to be as objective as you can be in all aspects of your life. Take a step back, take up the rose-colored glasses a little bit, and go from there. I love you guys. Please continue to be safe. Again, if you haven't, you know, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, do what you guys got to do. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Hey there, thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.